countries for years.
Let's say Trump wins, is allowed to win. I don't want to be too cynical about our system, which everyone wants to believe in. I think it'd be pretty tough to overcome what you've just described for anybody to overcome that. But let's say Trump wins, Trump and Vance win. What are the first things they should do to change the trajectory away from self-defeating, away from the self-harm that we're committing against our own country, and toward a series of policies that help the United States and restore sanity to the world? Like, what do you need to do?
What both Trump and Vance are saying about Ukraine is exactly right, and it's completely spot on, and it's utterly urgent that it be heard and understood. And that is, there is no basis for this war, and that it was provoked deliberately, accidentally, on a bluff, whatever, by the U.S. pushing this NATO business up to Russia's border in a way we would never accept in our own hemisphere.
Yeah.
So they both get this exactly, and that's great. And they understand this is a completely losing proposition, and that's correct also, because if Russia wins, it's a losing proposition. If Russia loses, it's even a bigger losing proposition by the risk of nuclear war. So they get that very much. And Trump is absolutely right also that this war could end in a day. That's not even a rhetorical gloss. This war will end the moment a U.S. president picks up the phone or uses my Zoom account, as far as I'm concerned, connects with President Putin and says, that NATO enlargement, that was a bad idea. I don't know how that got started. I know it went on for 30 years, but that's the end of the war. The fighting will stop that moment. There will be things to resolve, but that will be the end of the war, because that's the whole premise of this war. And to this moment, the current administration is saying Ukraine will be part of NATO. So they're guaranteeing that the war will go on. So Ukraine, they got it nailed down. What I would want to say to them...
But how do you do that? Even if you're president? You said a minute ago, presidents arrive in office with the fantasy that they're in charge, but they're not. These policies...
No, the presidents can be in charge. They will sit down, and it's like we now see. I think I haven't read the new Poindexter book, which was just reviewed, which dumps on Trump, and the Bolton book, which I did read parts of, which I found revolting. But part of what these aides do is they try to trick the president. They lie to the president. They try to continue an aggressive agenda. So it takes smarts for a president to be able to pull this off. Absolutely. But the president actually has the power to do it, but they have to be really tough and really resolute. And they have to know that they're going to hear a lot of bullshit from a lot of people
from their
in
own
dark
people.
Suits with blue ties. They will hear a lot of bullshit because this is a deeply entrained process.
Yes.
And so that it can be done. It's not impossible. And what makes it more likely right now is that I think we're at the end of a 30-year neocon cycle. Because remember, this started 30 years ago. I saw the beginning of it. I didn't understand it at the time. I was advisor to President Yeltsin. I saw the U.S. was not being cooperative. I couldn't understand why. You had a president that wanted democracy in Russia. He wanted normal relations. And the United States was saying, to hell with you, basically, on many different things. And I didn't get it then, but now I understand, of course, much better that this was the beginning of 30 years of we will corner you, we will defeat you, we may dismember you, but we will make sure you're a fifth-rate country. Okay, that 30 years, I believe, has now been exposed as a terrible failure. So no one could call U.S. foreign policy over the past 30 years as a success in any way. Every war we fought has been a disaster. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Ukraine. These are all wars of choice that we decided, that we went in, and we've spent, depending on the count, $5 trillion, $7 trillion. We ran up our debt. We busted the economy. We ignored all of our infrastructure and our domestic issues for this remarkably delusional idea that we would run the world. So if Trump and Vance come in, or whoever comes in, they have one advantage, which was no one could call the current course successful. And there are probably people in the deep state, not everybody by any means, who know, my God, okay, we've done enough. No more perpetual wars. We better do something different. So the president has the certainly the constitutional authority, and if they're a smart leader, the capacity to push, and they're coming in at a moment where maybe the door is a bit ajar to a change of direction. By no means automatic. It's not like the Washington establishment is sitting up and saying, oh, we get it. No, but they can't be sitting there saying it's all working great. So I think that there is that recognition. But the main thing I would say to President Trump and J.D. Vance, if they win, or to whoever is president, is that lesson that you understand about Ukraine is actually the same with China. That's even a more hard to accept and swallow idea in Washington right now. Because in Washington, one idea, I think even J.D. Vance says it, but I really disagree, and I want him to use the same reasoning to understand it, is we have no intrinsic fight with China. It ain't true. We have to compete with China economically. We have to compete with China technologically. Of course, we have to trade with China also. We should go visit China, by the way, because it's a wonderful place. But we have no intrinsic fight with China. And it's the same logic that they have understood vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia. We have no intrinsic fight with Russia. We have no intrinsic fight with China. So that's the main thing I want understood, which is all of these debacles are based on the idea that we have to run everyone else's business. We have to determine who's in power. We can even change their borders if we want. We can overthrow their governments. That whole approach has been a disaster for us, a multi-trillion-dollar, millions of lives lost worldwide disaster of U.S. foreign policy. And we don't need, for our security, 750 overseas military bases. We don't need that. They're expensive. We need to fix our roads, for God's sake. We need to make our country work properly, because you and I see when we go abroad, the infrastructure abroad sparkles compared to what we live
and
with
that's the most
in the
distressing
United
thing.
States.
And it's not even, I've traveled my whole life, as I know you have. And, you know, you're used to thinking of the developing world and then coming back to the kind of respite of the United
It's
States.
nothing like that anymore.
You pull into Kennedy or SFO or LAX or Boston Logan from abroad, and the first thing you notice is that it's dirtier and more chaotic. It's less attentive to the individual. It's harsher than the developing country you're flying in from. And it's so heartbreaking. You can't believe, if people traveled more, we'd have a revolution in this country. If they saw that Turkey is nicer than the United States, what?
I had a wonderful...
Did you feel that?
I had a wonderful conversation with an Italian political leader who I was in northern Italy, in Bolzano, beautiful city in the Alps.
Yes.
And I was saying how sparkling all the infrastructure is. And he kind of sighed and said, yes, it's very nice, but it isn't Oslo and Copenhagen. There, it's even more. But then he said, and I was really surprised, But Oslo and Copenhagen, if you go to China right now,
Right, I know.
they're leaving those places behind. And that's what we see, which is absolutely true.
Well, it's just so depressing. It's just so awful. And what's awful about it is that most people don't understand it. They don't know how thoroughly they've been betrayed by their leaders and by the advisors to their leaders, the Bill Kristols of the world, who really just don't care at all about the United States at all. It's not even an afterthought to them. It's all about something very different. And they've been screwed. Like, all the money went overseas.
Yeah.
All the energy is focused abroad.
Maybe in their little communities, wherever they live, things are nice enough. But for the rest of America, what are we doing? Why are we pouring unbelievable amounts of money and danger and lives into all of these conflicts? And so my main message to, because I really think Trump and Vance get it on Ukraine completely. But what I don't want is, and you hear it in Washington, is the idea, well, we have to stop that so we can take on our real foe, which is China.
Or Iran.
Or Iran. They're not our real foe in any way, shape, or form. We have issues with them. We have competition in the markets and technology, as I said, and in many things, but they're not an enemy. And there's no reason for them to be an enemy. And so it's exactly the same logic.